And so to me, it would be helpful to narrow it down I say that, by the way, also about Amplify. I have nothing in front of me to tell me Amplify has done a wonderful job, an average job, or a lousy job. And I think the board would, at least I would feel more comfortable as a member of the board to have some evidence on which to base that, as opposed to simply a statement from the district or wherever that came from. And then to try to get us over the hump, the forward plan here, at the level of execution, if you narrowed it down to just, are you going to continue? Everybody else has continued. The funding source is changing, but everybody else, if I understand it correctly, is continuing. If I missed that, let me know. So the question of terminating or what to do with Amplify could be just the narrow focus between now and the end of the month. And that might make it easier for you to facilitate doing something on a timely basis.
I hear two things, so I want to clarify. I hear that for a new teacher project, that you're also thinking that we need to continue the relationship with them, even though IPS is funding it. So you would like to keep that one in place. I'm just clarifying.
Yeah.
Because I'm seeing things in 4 different buckets, and so I need to make sure we're...
Let me put it simply, Superintendent.
Sure.
I applaud IPS for going direct on the relationship. It's a wonderful thing for
Okay.
them to do. I don't think that relieves us as a board of the statutory obligation to make sure things are still going okay.
So in that case, I'm thinking of what we need to be doing. In that case, then if we continue the lead, they were part of the lead partner piece with George Washington. If that was continued, then we would also do an MOU, perhaps with that group. With Voyager and Scholastic, because of the funding, we would also do an MOU, maintaining the lead partner with that. And then Amplify is the one that there's question about the actual deliverables and whether it's worth continuing. We have no contract. IPS is not willing to take on Amplify as a partner at all. Okay, the department is questioning spending its dollars on Amplify as a lead partner going on. And so we really would like to have a better partner to really do what might need to be done. So I think Amplify probably is the one we're still having some discussion about, and what do we do with that, because we have both parties not really wanting to continue that relationship, not only the school district but the department itself. So and I hear the concern, well, what do we want to do? And so we've started the RFP process already, so that's good. But the department, when we get to the action piece, I have no problem with continuing lead partner relationships with TNTP, Voyager, and Scholastic, and writing the MOUs to reflect that. In fact, it's our intention that we have full oversight. So it's Amplify, I think, that is the one that is questioned, and I don't think anybody really wants to spend dollars if the parties don't feel that it's what we need. So, but we do need a replacement, and we need to know that. So I think our dilemma now then is how do we go forward with this particular piece? Bernice, do you have any more thoughts you want to share? Or Dan, you may.
I'm going to pull from Dave and add to you. It's very important for the teachers and the parents and students and principals and all the various administrators at IPS to know what this board expects and the data we're going to collect and get it in a timely fashion in these MOUs. Because we don't want to lose focus. I think we've made some progress. We need some data from this year. And so the first point Dave made, the whole thing, we have to have information. That's why I brought up the growth question. You said, well, we have growth. Because of growth. Was it downward growth, upward growth? How much growth? And that's part of our responsibility, actually know this. And the folks that are working hard every day, very hard. I know a number of those teachers, because they happen to go through our institution. It's a big challenge, but they need to know the target has to be clear for everybody. So they can't have us over here with some vague expectation. We'd have to make that in the MOU very clear for everybody.
And I guess I'm curious if there's any lead partners in the audience, I'd love for them to make themselves known and join me. But I'm thinking as this MOU moves forward, they've been making monthly presentations to the board on their deliverables. And so I'm curious if they're wondering, what other data points have you not seen that you'd like to see? Because I bet they feel as though, to this question, you know, what are your growth? How are you saying you've grown? I bet they're thinking in their heads, we've provided. So they'd probably want to know what else we need to add to the MOU to make sure we're clear about what we expect to see.
And I guess I'm going to add that I feel the same way about the lead partner presentations as I do with the board regarding the turnarounds. We need uniform templates. We need to see information in the same manner. And so the department wants to work with these lead partners to have some uniformity as to what we see. So we really can see the data as we need to see it and see the growth as we need to see it, because everybody's reporting on all different kinds of things regarding the scope of their work. I might also add that there was a different scope of work from the department and a whole different scope of work from the school district. And so, talk about confusion, you know, lead partners are confused as to who and what they're doing. And so we want to have the dialogue together. That's going to happen through the outreach process. And we want to have some uniformity in what's presented, not only with the turnarounds, but with the lead partners as well. Because I share in your frustration every time I get the reports. Not to say that things aren't reported in how they see it to report, but that there's no commonality for us to look at to be able to discern how things are going in a fashion that we want to. So, you may. Thank you, Joy.
I would like to ask, you know, you keep bringing up the outreach.
Yes.
What will be their involvement in this process that might secure our position, you know, as far as a supervisory or a support role that may make us a little bit more at ease?
Well, I'm hoping to have regular reports from outreach regarding all of these entities, because they have sole responsibility for oversight of them. And so, no matter where they're located in the state of Indiana. So they are responsible for the focus and priority schools underneath Title I, and they are going to be working with them on a regular basis. So I'm hoping to have monthly reports to you from outreach regarding progress and what we're seeing. That hasn't happened before from the department. We have typically let the lead partners and the groups talk about what they see, but I think you need to hear the perspective of the department and the outreach actually happening. So there will be frequent monitoring of what's going on, and I just want to say again, we're firmly committed to making sure the lead partners and the school district get what they need to make things happen. So I hear continue TNTP, writing an MOU to reflect that, continuing Voyager and Scholastic, writing an MOU to reflect that, and we will get that out to you. We will get those MOUs to you, and we'll work quickly to get that done. So on Amplify, we have an RFP process ready. Perhaps, I'm trying to think how the board could take action. Dan, you being the senior member here on this, you and Dave, and talking about a little bit about how do we move forward if we want to change a lead partner. Oh, Bernice has a question.
I just, in terms of, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, just a question that hasn't been answered in terms of Amplify and preparing a contract for whoever the new partner might be, if that's the decision of the board, is we'll have to, David brought up funding source changes, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, that these relationships have always been funded by Title I dollars. And so we'll need to discuss or be clear about what the consideration is for the new partner if that's the way that the board chooses to go. Looking at Title I funding or, and I can't remember if that school still has Title I dollars, things of that nature. Just
Do we still have a source of funds to pay for this lead partner?
We have set aside, the U.S. Department allows us to set aside 5% of the 1003A, is it 1003A? Okay, I'm getting it right, funding. So we have currently about $489,000 set aside. This board did take action on funding with the SIG grants, the turnaround academies at the same funding level as they had in the past. So we did comply with that, I might go ahead and, so that's the funding that we have. We have $489,000 at the department at our discretion. The other monies have been given out to the schools with their applications, and the ones that we are talking about today, their partnerships are embedded within their plans.
And I might add, if I will, Glenwood, we talked about at the last meeting, if in fact the data supports that they will be in their 6th consecutive year, you will be considering action to take with that school. That same amount of money you just described may have to be considered for that, any new school coming on, in addition to a new partnership with George Washington. So I just wanted to make sure, because that's not a huge amount of money, so I want that consideration also to be shared.
And I think George Washington, they have 75 partnerships, and IUP, they have a lot going on. So I think whatever the scope of work is for the lead partner would be very focused, very specific to the data and what it is that we want them to do. For instance, if literacy is the main issue, if Scholastic's a great partner for that and has proven that, that might be a very narrow scope of piece that they actually do. If you're asking, do we have the money at the department to fulfill an additional year of Amplify, I think the answer would be no.
No, I don't know their contract amount.
I
but
don't
it's
I don't
pretty
recall it either,
large.
so I don't know what the amount was. But that aside, we don't recommend the partnership.
When actually, does Amplify know that? If you haven't told Amplify before today, that's okay. I understand that. If you have told them, when did you tell them? And what is your conversation with them now?
Teresa Brown, our Director of Outreach, who's kind of been working this entire process, has contacted Amplify and has this conversation with them and IPS.
And
This is a possibility.
and did that happen last week, a month ago?
From the last meeting till today, so I think she did most of this work last week, most of these meetings.
Well, I still think, obviously, the department's communicated something the board hasn't decided, which is, I guess, it is what it is. Regrettable, but it is what it is. But maybe the catch-up here ought to be give Amplify an opportunity to speak, give you all the opportunity to speak, have that come back to the board. If you work out an arrangement with Amplify, or you come to the board with a recommendation and notwithstanding that effort, you think Amplify should not be continued, then that would be a recommendation at the next board meeting. And I regret that August 30 will come and go in between that, but I don't know, we are where we are, and I don't know any way.
So we could just enter into a new contract, is what you're saying?
Well, path, I have no priority. Path, because I don't have any facts. Path 1 would be continue. Path -1 would be terminate or don't renew. And I don't know whether there's anything in between or not. They might be willing to continue to provide services in the interim or not, I don't know. But the point is, instead of trying to accelerate a process, do a whole bunch of stuff, why not just figure out work with Amplify, figure out the solution, including an RFP if you decide to go that way, bring it back to us in the first week in September as something to be ratified, approved. You'd have the risk that we would say no, but if you communicate individually with, I don't know, Brad or
I
David.
guess from the department's point of view, and in extensive conversation with IPS, it will still be the department's recommendation, and I understand the board can take its action, that not to continue the contract with Amplify, and I understand that you want more information from them. But the scope of the work that Amplify was to do with the professional development and the pieces that they are doing.
I'm sorry, I just want to move us on. I'm neither defending nor prosecuting here. I'm just trying to suggest that maybe the best thing to do is you all figure it out and bring it back to us in September.
Oh, for Amplify,
Right.
just giving us a little bit more time? Gotcha.
And two,
Okay.
I guess I want to clarify, Teresa reached out to all of these partners to say this is coming to an end.
Yes.
Please tell us, and those were the quotes from the districts, please
Right.
tell us how your partnership has been working. So she just kind of reached out to say, here's where we are. Please tell us how this has been for you, so we could prepare this report for you today. Not that, any decisions had been made, but rather please tell us how you're feeling about this relationship.
Who negotiated those lead partner contracts initially?
Department of Ed.
Department
Yeah,
of Ed?
the contracts rest with the department.
And the schools will now negotiate those contracts with the corporations rather?
No. Well, there's two things happening. They have their own contract with them through their SIG monies. We will have an MOU with them as well. We're going to be working with the school districts to be sure that we're going to have alignment and oversight of what needs to happen. As I stated earlier, the scope of work for one contract and the other contract, they're not even the same. They're not even focused on the same kinds of pieces. And there's been lots of confusion as to, especially on the part of the lead partners, as to what their real obligations are and to whom. So we want to clean that up, BJ. You are correct. We want to clean that up. But we do not want to get, I appreciate this conversation because the department's been wrestling with the actual continuation of contract in a legal term, and the board is clarified that today, that we want to continue lead partnerships. We're going to write MOUs to do that. We're going to be working with the school districts to be sure that we're going to have good deliverables on what needs to happen and templates that are going to be used and how that's going to look. So
So the
Yes.
schools can't change the scope of the work or the amount of involvement that the lead partner currently has isn't going to be reduced?
Oh,
That's the purpose of the MOU.
yeah, that's the whole purpose of it.
They've made this initiative
Yeah.
to
No,
contract
not at all.
apart from the department, but the
Correct.
purpose of the MOU is to lie on top of that and say, school, you cannot terminate this relationship that
Correct.
you've gone out and paid for.
Correct.
When I was talking about data, this is just pick right up on these and metrics. They have been giving us,
Mhm.
we haven't seen the nice stuff.
Right.
There's a couple things coming up here. The MOU, the contract has to be congruent within the directives of the memorandum, how we understand this to be, and the data we want. I do appreciate a template that will go across schools, but I also remember these schools were different,
Right.
and they had different situations. So you might have a base template, but I don't think we should be scared to have a, I don't know if it's a codicil or a little
Have some
addendums
differences.
say, like, yeah, that,
Certainly.
not all schools are the same, they have different needs. And so the MOU might have pieces and parts along with the standard template. And I just don't want to lose that. That's our guide. And then Dave, if I hear you right, we'll hear from you in September on the other one.
On Amplify. Okay,
And
so.
we'll see the MOU in September. You have direction from the board, though, and
Yes.
you'll surely do
Sure.
that.
Sure.
And if you want to add even more explicit, I was saying, yes, we do. If we need to be more explicit, because we don't want to let these to wander, get back where we started, because it was pretty desperate situations. Many of us visited all those schools, or near all of them. We saw the results, and human beings are hurt. Schools don't run correctly.
So as I hear it, we're going to, through the discussion, a motion later, under action, to continue lead partners with TNTP and have an MOU, Voyager, Scholastic, and then we're going to report back to the board in September regarding the Amplify contract and RFP process. Okay, thank you very much. That was very valuable to us. And glad we could work through that. It is 10 till 11, and I'm going to think we need a little recess here before we continue. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the social studies. 10-minute break so people can use the restroom and stretch. report by Bruce Blomberg at the Department of Education. Bruce? And if you could speak up when you speak into the microphones, please. I have heard that some people in the back can't hear any testimony. Thank you, Bruce.
Good morning, it's still morning, yes. I'm Bruce Blomberg, and I am the social studies specialist. In this position since July 2012. Prior to that, I was a career teacher, most of that time in Washington Township at North Central, but I have 40 years' experience teaching. First thing I want to do as far as in the update of the review of the standards process is to maybe state the obvious. The reason that we're doing this is Indiana Code 20-31-3-3, Section 3, which states that standards must be reviewed at least every 6 years. The current social studies standards were last reviewed in 2007, so we were due for the review process. In January, I started the organization process of getting committees created for the review process. Did this through memos via the Learning Connection and via superintendent's mail in January. 18 committees were created, kindergarten through high school. And with the information that I sent to you prior to this meeting, you can see the number of members on each of those committees. Some of that changed a bit as we were working. I reorganized K3 basically into one group because we worked on those standards together, because those standards work from K3, progressed from K3, and it made sense to work on those together. In addition, a number of organizations were part of the process. The Geography Educators Network of Indiana, the Indiana Historical Society, Conner Prairie, Children's Museum, the Indiana Council for Economic Education, the Bureau of Jewish Education, Indiana Council for Social Studies, and the Indiana High School Psychology Teachers Association. All participated in some way, shape, or form in the review of these standards. Once the committees were created, the 2007 standards were given to committee members, and they then started submitting suggestions, revisions, edits, and so on and so forth, until we finally met together via conference call, Google Docs, and hammered out a final draft document. That draft document has been on public review, or was on public review for all of the month of July up until August 2nd. And I have just taken some of the comments and some of the suggestions from the public review, and I'm currently making a few last-minute revisions and edits based on those comments. The timeline is now that the draft documents would go to the Education Roundtable and then to the State Board for approval sometime this fall. Early fall, I'm hopeful. Probably the biggest thing that maybe you would want to know, what changes did we make in these standards? Because at first view, if you look at the documents, you might think they haven't done anything. There's not much change. They do not look a lot very different from the previous standards. First of all, the previous standards were good standards. They were graded to be very strong content standards. And so we built on that. One of the things that was done was to change course descriptions and include course numbers and course abbreviations and so on. The Indiana standards and the descriptions did not do that. The Indiana standards description did not match the description that was in the titles and description document that we have out, and I thought it was necessary that those two be the same. So those that was the one major change. We reworded many of the standards, tried to make them clearer. If we eliminated standards, it wasn't that we thought that a standard was not, a previous standard was not necessary. It was possible to combine it with another standard. And again, one of the great things in being part of this process, and one of the, I think, most satisfying things of being part of this process is the way the teachers and the worked in this process, and the suggestions that they gave to make the standards a better document for teachers to use. And of course, that's the ultimate goal here. This is a document that teachers would be better able to use. For me, the biggest change deals with examples. Indiana social studies standards had many different examples contained in them. Those examples remained in K-7 through the K-7 standards. The reason we didn't do much with examples in K-7, most elementary school teachers don't necessarily have a social studies background. The examples were, I think, helpful for those teachers in particular. Grade 5 and grade 7 teachers have a social studies I-STEP to contend with, and many of the examples seem to help with preparation for the I-STEP exam, and so I didn't want to take away that kind of aid for teachers. When we get to grade 8, though, after grade 8, there is no social studies ECA. And one of the comments that I was getting with examples is this all that I have to teach? So I quickly came to the conclusion that sometimes examples could be limiting. When teachers saw examples listed, they automatically thought that this is all that I need to do to complete this standard, when the intent of the standard, of the example, is that the example, that's just the beginning, build on this, and there are many other things that could be used in meeting the different standards at different grade levels. It's especially this is especially true in grade 8 in the high school U.S. history, and probably one of the biggest comments that I got back from many teachers was, "What happened? Where are the examples?" The plan is, I think, to do something that's even better than to have the examples actually in the standards document. The plan is to have a resource document that will accompany the standards, that will have more resources, examples, all sorts of different things that teachers can use when covering and teaching the different standards. And the plan is to have these resource documents ready for the 2014-2015 school year, which is when the new standards, when approved, would be implemented. Most of the high school, grade 8 and high school teachers that I talked to thought this was a much better plan than having just a few examples within the standards document. So I think that's a significant change, and I think that's a very positive change.
Thank you very much, Bruce, and I might add that the department's going to be working within perhaps the Learning Connection to really make resources a big piece of what we do for teachers. The e-learning division has been placed within the curriculum division to have that kind of tie, so that we start to provide resources on a very regular basis to educators, and kind of a one-stop shop, to come and work. I might say that I enjoyed my meeting the other day, Bruce, with you and the history, Indiana
Historical
History
Society,
Historical Society, correct, and the wonderful resources that are being developed in conjunction with Lilly for U.S. history studies, in conjunction with Indiana history. So it was a great conversation and great examples about resources going forward. It's my understanding that we are going to have a meeting in September with the roundtable, and so this will be one agenda item on that, and I certainly appreciate all your hard work. This is not an easy task to do standards revision, and I see that you had an awful lot of people that were involved in this process, and that's what we want. So are there any preliminary questions? Yes, BJ?
Resource documents, is your committee who will create those? Will there be a separate committee that creates those? And will you also
I'm going to
post
start
those?
with the committee that I already had, but I will advertise, and anybody that wants to contribute most certainly will be able to contribute. I might say I'm really going to try and use the Historical Society and Conner Prairie to make sure that we're getting as much Indiana history into our social studies documents, because that's really one thing when you look through them that is not specific enough in them. Yes?
I'm delighted to hear that. With the bicentennial coming, one concern is that overly prescriptive standards push out Indiana history, even when it would be appropriate. So that's terrific news. Will we get a copy of the proposed revision that is on top of the current standards, so we can clearly see where all the changes have been made?
She's asking for a red line copy.
I think the easiest thing maybe for me to do would be to do a side-by-side, where I could do the 2007 on one column and the proposed 2013 on another column, and you could look maybe back and forth that way to see. I'm not sure I have one red line copy that would make much sense to anybody other than me.
Side to side would be fine, but I think that would be very helpful.
Okay, that's easy enough to do. Sure.
There are some national standards for social studies,
Yes.
and I'm curious about how your recommended standards for Indiana dovetail or align with those particular standards. And did you look at those standards as you made the revisions?
I have to say not exactly. The feeling, I think, when the 2007 standards were adopted, that a lot of those national standards were included at that time, so there wasn't a need to go back and revisit something that was really already accomplished. Again, we really didn't reinvent the wheel with the revision here, because the standards we had were already pretty good.
Since that time, the national curriculum standards have been revised, so I would urge you maybe to take a look at it, and it may impact what you're going to recommend, it may not. But I'd feel a little more comfortable if you at least looked at those national standards, and if it improves and enhances what we do in Indiana, fine. I still believe in local control.
Yes.
But however, we may see something in the national standards that would enhance what we're doing in Indiana.
I will say the one area that we did look at was current events and recent history, because that would probably be the biggest changes in those standards as well. And those, we tried to include that and be as cognizant of that as we could. So I think we've pretty much covered that, but I certainly will take a look and make sure that I haven't missed anything.
Thank you.
Just quickly, when the standards do come to us, would it be possible to get a little more of a snapshot of the background of the folks that were involved in recommending those to us, in terms of like how many years of experience, and kind of a snapshot? You've given us kind of a real brief, but I'm not asking for names, but I just kind of want to get a sense of the flavor of what was the credentials of the folks in the room that are recommending those to us.
I can do, yes.
That'd be great.
I have that. All of those are on the committee, filled out an application with that kind of information on it, so I can
And geographic representation would be
certainly,
good too.
yeah, and that was one thing I was trying to be as aware of as possible, is to draw from all parts of the state. But as you can see, there were some areas that were much more
Right.
represented than others, and it was very, very difficult to find psychology and sociology reviewers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bruce. On to the next item, readoption and expiration of rules scheduled to expire December 31, 2013. Kirsty Anderson from our legal department will be presenting this to you. Thank you, Kirsty.
Good morning. I'm Kirsty Anderson, and I'm a staff attorney with the Department of Education. And we have provided the board members with a memo regarding the process of readopting rules, and we did this specifically for the board members who are new and are undertaking this process for the first time. And so we wanted to give you, like I said, an overview as well as a list of all the rules that are up for either readoption or expiration, so that in your leisure time you could take a look at the rules, read over the rules, sort of familiarize yourselves with the rules. And so right now, what we're doing is we are presenting the process. We're not presenting any of the rules for approval at this meeting. There are deadlines that we have to meet before the rules expire on January 1st. And the purpose of this discussion today is just, like I said, to give you an overview, give you the list of rules. If there are questions about the readoption process, to answer those. If there's anything that we need to address at next month's meeting, when we will come before the board and seek your approval to initiate the readoption, then that's something we can do today as well.
Yeah, we really put it on the agenda in case we had any questions regarding the process. It's pretty straightforward, and we will be bringing it to you as an action item in September.
Right.
And it's, I want to be in the practice of trying to bring things to you in discussion before we bring them to action, and get in that kind of mode. And it's also the mode that I like to do to bring things to study committee so we can have more intense dialogue. Then eventually it might get into discussion, and then it might get on an action item at some point.
Right.
So simply, if you have any questions regarding the document, this was reviewed extensively. With me being new to all of this, I had many revisions prepared because I myself needed to understand it clearly. So I wanted to have it prepared for you to be as clear as it possibly could. But if you have questions at this time, Kirsty is more than happy to answer. Yes, David.
Thanks for being proactive. It's always nice to have a little time to contemplate some of these issues.
Right.
One of the statements you made is some of the rules or parts of the rules will not be expiring
Right.
on January 1st. And I understand that we have the authority to renew them now. But my question is, why? Why are we renewing them now if it's not required for us to renew them now?
I think it's just sake of ease. Like, there could be an article and several rules are up for adoption in that article. And as far as readopting them, it doesn't really do anything as far as your powers in the future to repeal, to amend those rules. So we just go before the LSA and say, we're just going to adopt this entire article. There may be some rules that are going to get caught up, so to speak, in that readoption, but it doesn't really affect the rules.
These rules we are readopting, there's been no changes in the rules. Is that what you're saying?
Readoption does not change the rule language. In order to do that, it's a separate process. It's a reamendment process, and again, that requires the board's approval. If you want to go forward and reamend any rules, which does change the language, the readoption simply says these rules are still in place. They have not expired.
In your analysis, did you look at legislation that has been passed in the interim to be sure there's consistency between reauthorizing the rules and legislation that's been passed since adoption?
Yes. And there is some legislation that will require the reamendment of these rules. And what the readoption will do is allow a rule to go forward, and it can be reamended or will be reamended in the future, but with readoption, it won't lapse because the reamendment process is a fairly lengthy process. It can take a year or even longer. And so by readopting these rules, we're we're still acknowledging that they may be re-amended or amended in the future, but we don't want to lapse. So,
I might also clarify that we're kind of given this list each year by LSA.
right.
To be sure that we keep everything in rule.
Yeah, it's just, it's kind of a rollover of the rule to next year.
Any more questions? Thank you very much, Christy.
Okay, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is timeline on remediation guideline development. At the last board meeting, it was that we gave you a study timeline for the emergency rule that we did on remediation and early intervention. And so Danielle is going to speak to that.
Yes, and I think actually you had this timeline last time, so hopefully you've had a chance to digest it, and you received it again in advance of this meeting. And I did mention also at the last meeting, and I'll reiterate, this is the timeline of the scope. There were 12 questions outlined in the interim study document of things we wanted to study over the next year. 9 of the 12, in my opinion, would fall under the purview of the Department of Education to lead. So this timeline represents our areas that we would be studying. So pleased to report that the ones that we outlined for August and September, the first was to receive a report from the College Board on the 16 AccuPlacer pilot sites that were in place last year. We had that meeting yesterday, so we received those reports. We're still diagnosing those. The next thing, the same thing, is to get schools their feedback. Once we diagnose those, we'll be able to share those with the schools and with you, of course. And then the meeting for the third item in August and September is scheduled for next week on the RTI, tiered intervention model, that we'd like to push out some ideas to schools. So we are well on target with our timeline from the Department of Ed in the study work. In addition to, at the top, I noted that we'd like to have at least an every other month meeting with representatives from the CHE, the DWD, and the Roundtable. I've reached out to those partners that helped create the original interim guidance, which was Sarah Ansel from the CHE, Jackie Dowd at the time with the DWD, and Dan Clark, to make sure they're the right persons moving forward, because I do believe Jackie has taken on a different role. So as soon as I have those names, which I asked for them to give those to me by Friday of this week, we will set those meetings and make you aware of those meeting dates for this work to take place. One thing that's not on this timeline that I just kind of thought of today, I want to have a communication that goes out to the field, to the schools, in our next DOE dialogue, because we are getting questions, because those that follow legislative action knew there was something forthcoming, but they're wondering, where has this gone? So I want to give them an update as to that we really put it on a study, and that the only thing that may be coming forward was that additional AccuPlacer for some of those identified students in the plan I presented, and then a memo would come from assessment about how that would happen. So I'm open to any questions.
We plan to give regular reports.
Yes, as soon as we start meeting, I'll give regular interval reports, yes. And I also believe that they will as well on their study questions.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Oh, question, Brad?
I want to make sure, this one caught me off the last time a little bit, so I'm
Sure.
trying to catch up as a new board member. So if this happened, I'm sifting through a sea of papers. Do we
Okay.
have the final rules that were intended to administer this? Have we seen those yet, or were we? I know the statute calls for this by July 1st.
Right.
And I've been asked questions about it. I can't find it, so I'm assuming I don't have it.
Correct, because what we recommended and what was, I believe, approved last board meeting was that we weren't ready to take action, that
Right.
there were all those things we wanted to study first. And that's what I mean by that core communication out to the field, because they don't know that. So they need to know that while, yes, you saw something that said there'd be new rules for July 1st, in fact, there are no rules. There's study, and we're going to be asking for their input.
Okay.
When I say they, we're going to be asking for school leaders to join us in this conversation.
Yeah, that's helpful to me. Do you have a sense of when we might actually take action on a proposed set of rules?
Yeah, I believe our timeline, and we said we would present in April of 2014 our final guidance to the state board, so it would be about a year out from, so by next May. For final plans, because we said there were so many things unanswered that we couldn't write a plan for you to adopt until we got those answers.
So I had a couple of questions also.
Okay.
So this was the legislative action that was passed in April, and there had already been, sorry, I've got notes in too many places. There had already been kind of a pilot program that had started on this. So what does this do to the pilot program? And I guess that's part of, when you're getting emails saying what's happening because they're not sure I'm not sure either. And so I look at this and think the legislature passed this in April, and the recommendation was we use ECA data, which comes out in the spring. And so if we don't use this next year's data, then we don't use till the next year's data. We're looking at a 2-year lapse in this remediation process. And so then I have all these thoughts. Then I look at like an AccuPlacer, which takes place in October, and I think, it's like NWEA. It's a remediation process where they get data back, and this is their chance to remediate instead of a pass-fail test 2 years from now, and now we've missed 2 years' worth of kids. And so I'm wondering if postponing it for that amount of time was really the best decision, and maybe not for everybody else, maybe for my vote.
Right.
But I'm just thinking, maybe this should go to the roundtable next month, maybe the roundtable and the Higher Ed Commission. I'm trying to speak in the microphone. I don't know if you can hear me. Maybe they ought to be looking at this next month and helping make some of these decisions and these timeline decisions, because I hate to see 2 years of kids not get remediation and not see, because AccuPlacer does that. It tells you specifically what skills they need.
Right.
And maybe we need some triangulation of data as opposed to just, here's the ECA 2 years from now, this is now pass-fail.
And we are adding, if you recall, the guidance actually.
The guidance that we passed, I'll
Yes.
clarify. The guidance that we passed at the last meeting actually put in place the testing of several groups of students. So we have the pilots going on, and those will be continuing. In addition, we're going to be testing more students that did not pass the algebra test. And so we have pools of students that we're actually testing this year coming up. And because we already have that ECA data. So we're actually using the ECA data that we just got, and those are going to go forward this year, as well as the remediation components that need to accompany it. So the department is very interested in the remediation pieces that need to be put in place to go along with the actual assessment piece. And so that's why we expanded the pool of who we're going to assess. We had not gotten data from the pilot, and the pilot was really delayed because there was a transition of superintendents, basically. And so some things weren't in place, and then we got things in place. And so we have data to look at, and then we have more piloting and more students to be tested. So we are proceeding actually with the actual assessment of students, and we need to get guidance out to the schools, as she just intimated, that here is the pool of students that will be assessed this year.
That's what I'd just like for us to know then, if the pilot's going to continue, if we're going to add groups, who are we adding, how much are we adding?
Right. It was in the table in the last month's documentation I gave you, and I believe it's about, we can resend it, I believe it's about an additional, based on last year's data, if the data holds true, it was an additional 8,000 students statewide that fell into categories of looking as though we definitely need to give the AccuPlacer to guide their remediation. So those would go into addition to the pilots. And the reason we said we wanted to study the pilots is we wanted to know how their remediation efforts worked. So once they took the AccuPlacer, and we want to learn from their best practices. Right. So I hear yes to everything you said, Carrie. I agree.
One step further in being a strong proponent of RTI, response to instruction and intervention, that those components in themselves are not as strong as they should be at the high school level, and we need to be sure that those processes are in place. So there's a twofold thing that's happening here for instruction. One is to be sure that RTI is afforded those students who are performing at that kind of level, to be sure that we have individual remediation pieces in place through that process. So we have a twofold piece that we're wanting to actually implement and make sure that we're having good data regarding. We will send that out to you again, the actual guidance, and we need to, for sure, get it out to educators.
And I will also include the memo that comes from assessment on how schools are going to be identifying and doing the test for those students to you as well.
Thank you very much, Danielle. All right, the next item on the agenda is A to F accountability update.
Madam Superintendent, can I do something with this microphone? It's the one that feeds that speaker, and it needs to be
Sure,
touched.
you may.
Maybe not.
Maybe you can move the podium.
It's tight. It's tight. It's taped down, so if you could speak into this when you're presenting.
Okay.
That if you don't.
Thank you. The governor has asked me to give a report today regarding A to F. As superintendent, I am committed to a strong accountability system that is fair and transparent. We have three things that we need to, that I'm going to be speaking about today. Number one, what happened in 2011 and 12. Number two, what is the plan for 2012-13 A to F accountability? And number three, what is the process for developing a new A to F accountability system for 2013-14 required by the Indiana General Assembly? On the first point, what happened in 2011-12? As I indicated at my February testimony before the Senate Education Committee, my office has had concerns about inconsistencies with the A to F system, reported by schools through appeals and communications to our department. In light of recent developments, the department began a probe into the A to F data system. Upon our preliminary examination, the department has verified that there was manipulation of calculation categories, and the department has also determined there are broader issues that must be examined. It is premature to discuss any findings of our examination at this time in light of the external review of the A to F accountability program ordered by Senator Long and Speaker Bosma, and in light of other potential investigations, including the Indiana Inspector General mentioned in the press reports. This afternoon, I will be meeting with Senator Long and Speaker Bosma to discuss the department's side-by-side analysis of the data calculations for the A to F accountability for 2011 and 12. The second point that we will need to address is what is the plan for 2012-13 A to F accountability. This problem is most troublesome for the department and for the State Board of Education. As the chair of the board, the process must wait until the 2011-12 data examination is complete. And at that point, the department and the State Board of Education must determine the best course of action in actually calculating the A to F accountability for 2012-13. Number three, what is the process for developing a new A to F accountability system for 2013-14 required by the General Assembly? The General Assembly, in its most recent legislative session, gave direction through HEA 1427 to develop a new A to F accountability system for the year 2013-14. Utilizing academic achievement and individual student growth, we are charged with developing a fair, transparent, and credible system to place schools into categories for school improvement. To build confidence in this new system, the process will need to involve experts, key constituencies, members of the DOE, members of the board, and of course some members of the legislature. The department has already begun this process, but there are questions regarding what must be completed according to HEA 1427 by the November 15 date. In my conversation this afternoon, I will be conferring with Senator Long and Speaker Bosma about that process to gain clarification. Hoping that this clarification will happen, we will all want to be sure that the proper time is afforded because the stakes are so high for our educators, our schools, our communities, and our students. As superintendent, I am committed to a strong accountability system that is fair and transparent. Following my meeting this afternoon, I will communicate with the board within a week regarding the timeline for proceeding. I am well aware of the urgency of this matter. I welcome now at this point fellow board members' thoughts. David?
You have many meetings and there's much going on. I think you just said you'll get back to us. Is that a fair conclusion?
Regarding the future. Actually, we're going to have some ongoing getting back to you on all three fronts. The first one in what happened in 2011 and 12. I am hoping that we can actually complete that by the September 2 date.
That's really the point of my question.
I'm
Was
hoping.
if I'm an educator in a school, if I'm a leader of a school or a district, what does what you just said mean to me?
What it means
What are you
is-
telling them?
I'm telling them that we have an investigation that's going to be ongoing. The department's going to do its investigation alongside the investigation with Senator Long and Speaker Bosma, the request on their behalf. In addition, we may not have control over other investigations that may happen as a result of these analysis. And so I know the goal is that we may have this completed by September 2nd. I'm not sure it will all be completed by then. I'm not going to be in control of some outside forces and investigations that may happen. But it's clear to me that we are going to have to wait until that is completed thoroughly to know how we proceed with doing the accountability grades for 2012-13. So we have many factors that the department is having to work with. I was fully prepared to begin total earnest work on developing the new system. In addition, my staff is going to need to be working on not only that, but working on 2011-12, and then we're going to be all wrestling with the question about what do we do with the calculations for 2012-13. I will go in, David, with your question to basically say, in essence, there's going to be probably some discrepancies between what was actually done and what you actually approved in rule. And so we are going to have to wrestle with how we go forward in doing the 2012-13 calculations, and that is most troublesome for both the department and the State Board of Education. So we are going to have lots of continuous dialogue and updating and information. I simply can't report anything more than that. I can't report timelines. I can't report, it's something it's a process we're just going to have to continue. I will say that it's unlike the I-STEP issue. In the I-STEP issue, the department could hire a third party to come in and we just take their word for this. Okay? This is totally different, totally different. We have a state agency who actually has conducted the accountability pieces that has a responsibility to this state board, and it involves broad issues that are going to have to be addressed at some point. So we're committed at the department, and believe me, we are working hours that you wouldn't believe, not only in preparation for this board, but going forward in all three of these aspects. It's a daunting task for this board to have to wrestle with in light of having I-STEP scores delayed already. And I might add, go ahead and add, and I said that earlier, we're expecting to get the I-STEP information out in August, but everybody needs to be reminded that we also calculate pieces that have to do with teacher evaluation regarding A to F and regarding the I-STEP information. So we're talking about great delays in having information back. Talking earlier, we were talking about these schools going into their 6th year. Oh my, I have no idea when we're going to have all of this information that we're going to need to even know that we have schools in the 6th year of their, of I-STEP, meeting intervention. This is serious stuff that we're having to deal with. So David, I appreciate you wanting to have more clarification, but I simply can't provide any more. I'm totally hoping that we can have things done by September 2nd. In my initial conversation with Senator Long and Speaker Bosma, I reiterated that I'm wanting things to be expeditious in getting clarity on where things are so that we can move forward here in Indiana. Thank you for your comment. Do I have any more comments from the board? Yes, Brad.
I just wanted clarity. With regard to our obligations on the November 15th deadline for the changes
Yes.
required, do you have a sense of how that will unfold in terms of how we get the stakeholder input to come to that?
Actually, that's what I'm going to be giving you
Okay.
after I have my conversation this afternoon. The part that we're wrestling with, that I want to have dialogue about, when does emergency rule actually need to happen? When does the plan design go to the legislature, and how does that feed into emergency rule? There are procedural things that I want to be sure that I'm very clear about proceeding on before I give you the timeline to make that happen. It is clear that we have to be very committed to getting a new process done for 13-14 because we're going to be using the 14 data here in the spring. So we're on a fast track anyhow. Emergency rules allow us to do that. I just need to have great clarification as to what our requirements are under the law. And I will get right back to you as soon as I've got things clarified, and we'll proceed. We do have public comment on this item. I will, the time is getting late, so we're gonna try and limit to like 2 minutes per person to make their comments. And so we're going to call off names of those who spoke, who wish to speak regarding this topic. So first is Kathy Fuentes.
Well, I'll try to be 2 minutes. Hi, my name's Kathy. Do I lean to this one? There's a lot here. My name's Kathy Fuentes Rohr, and I'm here today instead of getting my kids off to school on their first day back, because after watching the last state board meeting online and reading newspapers lately, I decided it was important for you all to hear back from parents. I have 4 children, and the youngest one is a 3rd grader this year. It's because of this, the fact that he will begin the testing of iRead3, iStep, and so forth, that I felt compelled to come today. There's a drastic difference between what school was like for my oldest, who's 19, as compared to what it's like for my youngest, who is 9. When my oldest son was in 3rd grade, there was time for hands-on projects, science experiments, and recess. His day was an hour shorter, and after school we had time to play in the creek behind his school with friends before we returned home to snack and homework. My 9-year-old is in school from 8:30 until 4 o'clock, and he gets 1 recess of about 22 minutes a day. He brings home fill-in-the-bubble sheets every week. There's very little sign that he's doing any science and social studies because so much time is devoted to assessing and benchmarking his progress to show growth for the iStep. When he gets home, there's hardly time, and this is all a result of testing. And more than that, it's a result of the stakes, like the grades, that are attached to it. If our schools weren't afraid of failing test scores and the fear of repercussions from the state, we might not have had our school day extended so that they can fit a 90-minute straight instructional time on reading that's demanded by the state and to test prep for those results. Any educator can tell you that test scores are not the end-all be-all of learning, and any parent can tell you that their child is so much more than that. I want my children to think outside the box, not fill in the bubbles. I want them to be able to discover their passions and be creative, and those things cannot be found on the test. I want them to respect differences of opinion and resolve conflicts peacefully, and they can't do that without recess. I want my teacher to be free to follow children's interests and create her own assessments. I want my teacher to not be afraid to go off script, but be able to meet my child where he is in his development and go from there. Why should the state, with the iRead, decide whether or not my little boy goes on to 4th grade as opposed to his teacher who's been evaluating his progress all year? I voted for you, Glenda Ritz, because you understand that kids, including my children, are losing the joy of learning because of the emphasis and overkill of testing. Okay, sorry. Well, moving on, I say the parents did not start this A to F system, and we don't need it to know what's going on. We would rather that our schools be graded on something other than test scores. We want to know whether or not they're getting a broad curriculum. Do they have enough funding to have small class sizes? Do they have art, music, and PE? Do they have a librarian? This is the stuff that we'd rather see our money go toward as opposed to the $46 million in testing that we have. So, thank you.
If you could, Kathy, please feel free to email your entire piece to us.
Sure.
We very much appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you. Phyllis Bush is next.
This one or this one?
Yeah, just speak loud.
Okay, I'll use my teacher voice. My name is Phyllis Bush, and I'm here because, I'm making a bigger sacrifice than Kathy because this is my birthday, and I'm here, and I expect you all to sing happy birthday to me. Anyway, the reason I'm here is I'm very concerned about the A to F scoring, and to put it, since I'm on a time frame, I'll just put it to you like this. Every time I see a car that says my kid is an honor student at such and such, it makes me want to run into that car. When I see a sign in front of a school that says we're an A school, that really ticks me off because so does that make my school a C school? What does that mean? I am really bothered by this kind of faux accountability that we're going for, because who in your neighborhood, who in your school, who in your town does not know which are the good schools? Who does not know in every building who are the good teachers? Why do we have to put a label on it? If the neighborhood school if my neighborhood school comes up with a C, what does that do to my property value? I am concerned about what does that do if I'm in a C school and I'm valedictorian? What does that mean about my score? Does that mean that I am devalued? That I no longer, that my school, my teachers, none of those are worth squat? So I would ask you, in this urgency to get towards evaluating everything, can we put a pause on some of this stuff? Talk to some teachers, talk to some kids, talk to the people who are actually being impacted by these things, because I think that is really significant. And with that, if you'd like to get me some cake, I'll see you later.
Thank you, Phyllis. Happy birthday. We have anybody else on this one? I do thank you for your comments. Thank you very much. And I skipped accidentally standards review underneath discussion. So I'm going to go back to standards review. I believe you received a timeline this morning regarding standards review timeline. I have said in several different instances and in my testimony on just this week regarding standards review that I plan to have the committees appointed, just like we started with the social studies. I plan to have those by October 1. I am telling you today that I plan to have that done by September 10. The next interim study commission hearing is on September 10, and I'm making a commitment to have the committees in place by then. So I just wanted to, you asked for a timeline. I'm sharing the different obligations that we have on behalf of the department and the State Board of Ed. And so that is for your review. If you have any questions, I certainly will entertain them at this point. Hearing none, we're going to go on to the iStep update. As indicated earlier, we are hoping to work with CTV to actually release student score information to schools and to parents by the end of August. We have a lot of work to do regarding that. Dr. Hill is still doing his analysis of students that still might be considered to be invalid due to interruptions. And so that work continues, and he will inform our work going here forward. I did invite CT McGraw-Hill, Ellen Haley, to speak with the board, or if you have questions for her, she certainly is here. We have ongoing negotiations with CTV McGraw-Hill and are making progress to that end and hope to conclude that sometime soon. So without further ado, Ellen, if you would like to address the board and if the board has questions for you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ellen Haley, and I'm president of CTB McGraw-Hill. And I just appreciate you giving me some time on your agenda today. You've probably known that I've met with the commission. Yes, I have a very soft voice, so I'm worried about these. I was a teacher, but I never yelled, I guess. You probably know I've already been to the Commission on Education and spoken to legislators, and I've had many opportunities to meet with the superintendent and her staff over the last few months, so I wanted to come to apologize directly to you. And I'm not sure if you're interested in me telling you exactly what happened. I could do a shortened version of it and then mainly spend the time on what we've been doing in the last few months to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And then I'd be happy to take any questions. And I do have a colleague with me, Devin Loftus, who I asked to move to the front here. He's our Senior Director of Software Engineering, and if your questions get too technical, you'll suddenly see him at the microphone. First of all, again, my sincerest apologies for what happened. I was a teacher, and I was never all that great at taking tests. And my mother would say, never say that. You were a good student. You were good at taking tests. But I love your testing program because you have applied skills and multiple choice. You have paper and pencil and online. You have lots of opportunities for students to show what they know how to do. And you have formative assessment and summative assessment. And sometimes you'll hear there's too much assessment, but I think it's better to have lots of data along the year rather than just one point in time. But I know from being a teacher and having family here in Indiana, and you probably know we employ over 2,000 people at the Indianapolis Center here on Michigan Road, where we do the scoring for all of our testing programs across the whole country. We have all of our customer service there, all of our tech support there. So all those people have families, and many of them, of course, know what happened here. All of them know what happened, and some of them were impacted too. So we take this personally and seriously. We've been in the state developing the I-STEP for many, many years. When it was the I-STEP, before the I-STEP Plus, when it was the I-PASS. So we feel that we know the state and we know the schools and we know the ripple effect that these 2 days of interruptions had on classrooms and teachers. So that's basically what happened. On April 29th and April 30th, we had system slowdowns, and students saw on the screen, "Please wait" signs. The system would not let students go on to the next question until we were sure we were capturing the answer to the question they were on. And those interruptions took too long. Lots of students were kicked off. They had trouble getting back on. On the first day, the department, schools, us, we all at the same time saw that this was happening, and we immediately, luckily, could see that it was memory on our servers. We didn't have enough memory. So we were able to add the physical memory onto the servers right away and hoped that nothing would happen again. But the next day, something similar happened again. Students were getting the pause. Not all students, but a percentage of students across the state. And of course, this caused rescheduling of testing all the way out through that whole week, maybe even longer for some schools. The second day, it turned out to be virtual memory, which is memory that the application uses, different than the memory type on Monday. So we corrected that right away. And if you have any familiarity with technology just in your day-to-day life, you know sometimes technology does this to you. You get kicked off of the system or you're interrupted. And from our perspective, sometimes in technology, you never find out what really was the main cause. So for us to identify right away that it was memory and be able to fix it from our point of view was a good thing, recognizing, of course, that it impacted schools the whole week. So since that time, what we've done is we've been able to replicate the problem now, which is a good thing. Now we have 100% real data from Indiana. You know, your students took the multiple choice portion of the test online. 100% of schools did, and this was the first year that they did that. And so we have that data now, and we can run our load tests using 100% data rather than data that we were replicating before, trying to imagine what the usage pattern would be and testing the system ahead of time. Now we had the real data. So we ran it through our tests again, and we got the same result, which is a good thing. That means the root cause, the physical and virtual memory, those were the reasons, because the exact same thing happened. So now we know the infrastructure that we need to put in place, and that's what we're doing right now. We've brought in a third party and several experts from McGraw-Hill themselves to look at everything, the network, the infrastructure, the application itself, the servers, the memory, everything, and put in place what we believe is the right infrastructure for next year. And then we're going to rerun the load tests based on all the information we have from the real-time data, which we're fortunate to have now. And our commitment is that we're going to make sure that the infrastructure can support 200% of what will be needed next year. So in addition to that, we're going to be running a stress test in cooperation. I don't hope it's okay to say this. I know we're just in early discussions. Stress test across all the schools in collaboration with the Department of Ed. We need to pick a day pretty well ahead of the actual test window so that if there's any issues on our end, but also at the school's end or the infrastructure end, there's time to correct things. We attempted to do this in 2012. Everyone in the state cooperated, and the schools are great partners with the department and with us. But there was the one snow day you had. I think you had one snow day in 2012, and it was the day that we had planned the statewide census-wide stress test. So we only had about 50% of the schools online. And of course, we used that 50% to help inform this past spring. So we're going to pick a day, I don't know when. We'll have to find a day when it's far enough away from testing, but no snow in the forecast. And we will do further load tests. And so I'm confident that the things that happened will not happen again, that we know the root of them. And you just have to know how horrible we all felt about this. We genuinely know the impact that we caused, and we're sincere in planning to fix it.
Now, I know the board is very knowledgeable about this entire issue. So if you have any questions at this time for Ellen, now's your chance. BJ?
I'm going to read this. This is from my colleague, Tony. I just got a text from him.
Oh,
so
no, those aren't fair. They have to be your own questions.
Would you ask what effect, if any, the bandwidth speed, megabits per second, at the impact that schools had on the disturbance? Did that play a role in?
Yeah, I'll ask Devin to come up. My understanding is that those 2 days, that did not have an impact. There were some other interruptions. Anytime you have online testing, there could be, a break between the school's infrastructure and our servers. And I think we did see some of that other times in the week where it might have been at the school site that there was a problem with bandwidth. But on the 2 days I'm talking about, it had nothing to do with the schools. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, BJ.
I'll let you stand near me.
Any other questions from the board? Brad?
I do want to ask a few. I did read the report carefully. I found some very interesting things in there, some things that do concern me, particularly with the way the meeting started here today, talking about the minutes and the flexibilities that were issued, the public comments of the teacher who came forward and asked us to give these reforms a chance. I want to see fairness and transparency. Teachers who know me and have taught me know that I'm going to insist on that. But I'm also worried that we may have jumped the gun a little quick. The results of the study, it was interesting. They didn't just look at last year, went back and looked at longitudinal evidence to make sure that statistically we could say whether or not the disruptions invalidates the data. And unless I misunderstood the report, what it suggests is that the data is actually valid despite the interruptions. In fact, one of the tables I found most interesting, which was table 13, showed that interrupted students actually performed slightly better than the uninterrupted students, which I got to tell you as a former principal didn't surprise me, because if you extend the testing window a few days and you're not trying to cram 3 tests into a day, that might have had something to do with it, but I may be bringing a research bias to that. That's a dissertation study later on. My concern, I guess it's more of a concern than a question, is that there was something else that was revealed to me in the study that I was not aware of, and that was flexibility issued back in the spring that changed how results of 3rd and 4th graders were reported, that actually skewed those results, causing the 4th grade results to look higher and the 3rd grade results to go lower. And my question on that is how do we go forward? Everybody's concerned right now about transparency and fairness, and I get that, but we have to, I think, allow the data to guide us. That's what we're asking teachers to do in the classrooms, let the data guide their decision making. We have got to do that. I am very concerned by what I read in that report, that we may have pulled the trigger too soon on the use of this data in terms of how it's used to evaluate teachers. And secondly, I'm concerned about what happened with the 3rd and 4th grade data, and even question the legality of whether or not we can even do that based on my understanding of the statute. And I'm not an attorney, but as I read that statute, I just have real concerns about that, Superintendent Ritz.
Well, I certainly can address the flexibility that was afforded to 4th graders who went on to 4th grade is not the result of the skew. The skew is a result of the actual iRead 3. We actually retained 2,500 students that were in the grade 3 cohort that did not go on to grade 4 cohort. And so that accounted for the dip in grade 3 scores and the increase in grade 3 and the increase in grade 4. 250 students at the school level did take the test. They were 4th graders, and they did take the 4th grade I-STEP. That in itself did not skew any data. That they were 4th graders. They were already in 4th grade. So that flexibility did not in itself, but the iRead 3 that is reported in there most definitely is accounted for in the dip in grade 3 and the rise in grade 4. And you are correct with that. Any more questions for Ellen? Thank you very much, Ellen, for attending today. I know you made a special trip here, and I certainly appreciate that.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, so sorry, yes.
Comments usually in the beginning of the meeting. Do we have any other people that are to speak, and if so, do they know?
We do have some people on this topic.
Okay.
Yes.
We're just getting toward the middle of the day, and
Yes, we do have, yeah, that's why I alluded Go ahead. Erica Haskins wishes to speak on the topic of iStep. And that will be followed by Jason Seid. You have 2 minutes. Is Erica here? Is Erica here? No? Okay. Jason? Thank you for attending.
Thank you very much for hearing me today. My name is Jason Seif, and I take great pride in being a teacher at Indiana Connections Academy. I'm not coming to you today as a Connections Academy teacher. I'm coming to you as a teacher in the state of Indiana. And as such, I'm speaking as an individual. I take great pride in being a teacher in Indiana. We are at the forefront of innovation. I consider myself part of a vanguard that's going to represent what education is going to be in the future. I can't wait to see the next 20 years in education. Over the last couple weeks, I've been engaged in preparing for the school year. My students aren't arriving until next Monday. I say arriving, of course, being a virtual charter school. It's a little different scenario. But an important part of what I'm doing is conveying clear expectations. It establishes my own authority as an educator. It also lends authority and credibility to my school and to the larger institution of education here in the state of Indiana. My concern is, as a result of the iStep situation from last year, coupled with the late reporting, complicated by the introduction of RISE 2.5, that we are undermining our legitimacy as an institution. I want to tell you that my colleagues and the households that I work with throughout the school year look at the Indiana Department of Education as a partner, as a collaborator in the education of their students. I'm standing before you very powerful people, and I got to tell you that's not the case. What we see is a regulatory body that is serving as an obstacle to the effective education of our students and to the effective servicing of our households. We need iStep information to inform placement decisions. I need that information to make early interventions. Although I'm social studies, reading is important and mathematics are important. Thank you very much, folks. I look to being a partner with you, and I hope you address these concerns and return legitimacy and consistency to the Department of Education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I might also add that in the ongoing dialogue with CTB McGraw-Hill in our negotiations, the aspect that teachers and educators and parents have not received their scores is of the most prime concern. Teachers and schools were not afforded the opportunity to look at scores in summer school placement. They were not afforded the opportunity to look at scores to place students in grade classrooms this year at the start of the year. And I take that extremely seriously. And so CTB McGraw-Hill is well aware of the department's displeasure, and not only displeasure, it's just unacceptable that we did not have data on May 24th when we were supposed to have data on May 24th. I just want to go on record as saying that the department expresses those very same concerns, that we were not afforded the opportunity to have the data that we needed to work with our students and to place our students and to make sure that we had clear expectations going forward into this school year. And that plays a big part into the negotiation process with CTB McGraw-Hill.
By the way, did we get all the end of course assessment reports?
I believe that is forthcoming. That has just, who is here? Danielle, do we have somebody here from assessment?
Not that I'm aware of, and I believe the rescore window and the retest
Right.
window is closed, so it'll be forthcoming.
Yes, we're online, we're on time for all of that. All right, we are ready now for the consent agenda. And before we do the consent agenda, Bernice Corley would like to explain item number C, just for those who may not be familiar with what that entails.
Item C, and I'm sorry I forgot my code, but anytime the governing body of the school changes their structure, whether it be membership, term of elected office, anything like that, anytime they seek to do that, they have to, as part of that process, seek approval from the state board. So that's what this is. I think he specifically has 2 at-large members. Both members serve a 4-year term, both go off or up for election at the same time. So what Kankakee is trying to do is stagger their elections so that they don't have 2 at-large people up at the same time. So that's what this plan is, and that's why it's in front of you. This happens anytime a body wants to change something like this.
I have a question on item A. Is it okay to ask a quick question? The petitioner in this lawsuit is a city within the congressional district that I represent. So my question deals with the settlement offer, and your memo didn't address this. Did the city of Mishawaka receive the full amount they were seeking in the lawsuit? Or if not, what percentage of the monies they were seeking were agreed upon?
Michael, can you speak to that? Michael Moore is an attorney in our soil labor department. Sure.
Question was, City of Mishawaka was a petitioner in the lawsuit that you cite. It's part of my congressional district, and I want to be sure I represent them. And the question is, in the settlement agreement, did they receive the entire amount that they were requesting in their petition? If not, what percentage of the total did they receive?
For the transportation of students that were placed at a facility within Hamilton Heights. And so the last phone conversation we had was that Mishawaka agreed to pay half of the transportation costs, which is what Hamilton Heights was requesting.
Okay, so it's half of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I haven't seen anything regarding the numbers, though. That's all they told me so far.
Okay, that's helpful. It wasn't in the information provided.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is there an issue that I need to address in this topic?
I'm sorry.
I didn't know if you were referring to something here. Did we miss somebody on speaking? If so, I'll go back to it. So, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Is this require a roll call, Laura? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are on to new business, action items. All right, it appears, and in my pardon, that we did not catch this. We have 2 more people that we're going to hear briefly to speak about accountability. One is Megan Cooper, and the other is Tamika Bennett. And so we'll do that before we go into action items. My apologies. My apologies. Is this Megan?
Yes, thank you.
Megan.
I'd just like to thank the State Board of Education for your service and dedication. It doesn't go unnoticed at all. But my name is Megan Cooper, and I've been an educator, specifically 3rd grade teacher, for the past 7 years. And I'm speaking on behalf of accountability. Beginning my 8th grade year, or my 8th year teaching, I've had the pleasure of being part of many students' success stories. At the beginning of each school year, I watch students walk into my classroom excited to see their friends, explore their new classroom, and they're eager to learn something new. Once the school year begins, it's my job to provide all of my students in the classroom with the best education possible. I could have up to 25 students relying on me to understand their passions, their struggles, and to teach to their specific learning styles. The only way to teach all of our students effectively and to prepare them for future successes is to have an educational accountability